Good morning, guys. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. Hold on one second here, JD, and we'll get started. So clearly we're having a gap up, a small gap up to uh, the 1820 level. And first of what I'd like to start off, or the way that I would like to start off, is looking at, hold on one second here. Okay, there we go. So let's take a look at the chart first. I kind of want to do an executive summary, if you will, of what I expect will happen. Let me see what everyone's. Hold on, I'm getting a message. Someone's having a hard time getting in. Hold on one second here. Okay, so if we look at the trading that we had yesterday, right? We had long liquidation. So generally, after long liquidation, I expect the market to go into balance. So I want to kind of run through the executive summary of what the scenarios that I think could play out today, and then for those that want to drop off, kind of get the short and dirty version. And then I'll go into a little bit more detail on the volume profiles and some of the tick charts. So that being said, let's jump over here and first look at ES. So yesterday when we broke down essentially from this 1826 and a quarter to 1828 and a quarter, and I would expect responsive buyers there the first time back up into this area. And I've lost my drawing tool. Hold on one second. Yes, I have. So we will use this instead. So in this area right here, first time we get up here, I'm definitely expecting responsive buyers in this area. Okay, and then we're looking at a couple of possible scenarios. So let me grab my mouse. I don't know what happened to my drawing tool, but I'm not going to pause the webinar to fix it. So what I would hope would happen, right, of the two easiest scenarios to come out today, right, would be that we get to Globex highs, which are currently sitting at 1820. So I'll have to bump this up just slightly. This zone will go 1820, 1818. But hopefully we could get up above Globex highs and make a push into the white zone. The first time into the white zone, I'll be looking to take a responsive short. If you look, that would be a very nice rotation, the 1826 and a quarter to 1828. It would be nice if it's accompanied by tick divergence, but it doesn't have to work that way, right? On the downside, the other side of the range would be the overnight low, which would be sitting right here. Actually, we're above yesterday's lows on the Globex. The low is sitting at 1812 and three quarters, right? And the low yesterday was right back here against 1809. So it makes the bottom end of the range a little tricky, right? There's two possible scenarios here. We could come right into Globex lows, right, and find responsive buyers to push us back up into the middle because a balanced day is what I'm thinking we'll end up with, right? But as you'll see in a minute, if we go back, usually those balanced days come with a test lower and then pushing back up into the range. So the first test we'll have is Globex lows, right, which also accompanies gap fill, and then yesterday's lows as well, okay? If we can get below there, everyone and their brother knows that 1804.50 to 1806.50 in that range is huge support. Everyone's looking at it. Everyone wants it. So one of two things are going to happen when we get there. We're going to find really strong responsive buyers step in, possibly before we even get to the zone. When everyone and their brother knows that this is an area of support, people tend to step in front. What would be really nice for us, if we could arrange it right, is to get a shakedown below and panic some sellers towards this 1800 level right here, all right, and then come back above and close above, get above this 1805, 1806, and then get above Monday's lows, right? That would push us right back into the middle of the range or to the top of the range. It would be a lot easier than having to just simply gap and go and move back up to Monday's highs. But if you did your homework, as I pointed out last night, we have had scenarios where we opened up and pushed up all day long. It's rare to have that, but it can occur. So what are some of the signs that we'll be looking for, which way we're going to get set up? And by the way, if you'll notice, both of those set up what I call a trap trade. A trap trade is very simple. We break an important level, right? Establish some time above it, then we close back below it. To give a perfect example, that would be what happened yesterday. A quick example of a trap trade here. I'll show you. Is this yes? 5 minutes. Here we go. Trap trade would have had us open here, establish new highs, fail to get those new highs, and then close below. You'll notice when we actually physically closed below in this area right here, I'll highlight it. This area right here, and we were unable to get responsive buyers. All these people here were trapped, right? And then we pushed to the bottom end of the range. The bottom end of the range had been tested multiple times, right? It came over lunch, and we broke to the downside. That is a trap trade by definition. If you look at set up a little bit differently in NQ, and I called it out in real time. Let me see if I can find my NQ chart really quick. There we go. Let's do this. Okay. Yesterday in the morning, we broke above Friday's highs. We held above there for an extended period of time, right? And I tweeted out, if we get back below 35.60, right, which would have been where we broke. If we get out back below and we hold, that'll be a trap trade. Will push us to the other end of the range, which in this case was the white zone and then Friday's lows, which is exactly what happened. You'll see here on that trap trade, usually what happens is we simply trade on most days to the other end of the range. We find responsive buyers and would expect to trade back up here. As it was, we broke down, right? And that made sense since we were below the white zone, but usually you would expect to move back up into the white zone before breaking down. And everyone else knows what happens yesterday in terms of the long liquidation, right? This pattern, but where we come up, we break out above. If we don't continue, right, which is what we needed to do on those new highs, and we close below, you trapped everyone in this area. I think that explains trap trade pretty well. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it this morning. Hold on 1 second here. So, flipping back over to today's, I think that gives us an outlook. Again, what I expect is the market to really balance between the two, and I would expect one of two things, right? We're either going to break above Globex highs, push, and then push back down into the range, right? With having Globex lows and Monday's lows hold us for the day, and we end up with balance in between. What would be a preferable scenario is that we find those responsive buyers that were there yesterday. What I would like to see is a push below Globex lows and Monday's lows into this somewhere between 1806 and 1800, right? Get people overstepping, right, and overreaching for the downside, get them trapped, and then push back up above Monday's lows and then back up into the range, right? Remember, we had a really wide range yesterday, so even though we're talking about a possibility of a 20-point move or 15-point move in each direction, that is certainly possible after a long liquidation. Our average day is closer to 12 to 15 points, right, in terms of range. A 12 to 15 point range right now, if we're trading 1820, right, would push us right into this 1805 area. It'd be almost perfect for a push back up above Monday's lows and into Globex lows again, right? And that would give us actually a fairly nice looking balanced day. Let's go look at NQ real quick. Hold on 1 second here. Oh, one more thing while I'm on this topic of VS. How are we going to know who's in control and what order we're going in, right? I want to step over that for my clients one more time. So if we open at Globex highs and we fail, right? How do we test the strength, right? First, we're going to have gap fill. Gap fill will come down at 1814 and 3/4, roughly. Half of that, between 1820 and 1814 and 3/4, puts us roughly at 1816 to 1870, right? So if we get down to half gap and we don't hold, and if we can't test that half gap, wow, that was easy for me to say, that would be a sign of strength to the upside, right? If we can't, certainly if we can't get full gap, it would be a sign of strength as well. The half gap is really what I'm concerned with. Normally, the other scenario that I would expect, right, is we come into Globex highs, we hit half gap, and then we hold at the gap, yesterday's lows, and we push back up, right? It will be another scenario and we have a smaller trending range. I hope we don't end up with a tiny range. It's very possible. We've already had from the lows of yesterday to the high overnight, right? We've already had a 10-point move. The overnight range could be stolen, and we end up with a small balance area between these 2 points, right? If you see that, what will that be denoted by? The tick will stay consistently between plus 500 and minus 500, right? We'll get usually we'll get gap fill in that scenario, and we won't push much be below that, and we'll come back and retest Globex highs, but we won't be able to push much above that. That would be the overnight range is stolen. There's not a lot to do. You'll want to pay attention to the rotations in that case. Also, the other thing I want to bring up before I move on here is time of day. Usually, if I look at my P&L charts, right, and I did not mean to do that. Usually if I look at my P&L charts, the majority of my P&L comes prior to 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 o'clock New York. Okay, I'd say probably 75 to 80% of all my profits come in that time of day. The rotations are stronger because you have both European participation and you have U.S. participation. The snaps out of the zones tend to be quicker, right? When you get to the afternoon, you have less participation. You can have, and on long liquidation days, you can have scenarios where there's no rotation down. So pay attention to your time of day. I'm reluctant to enter trades between 11 and 1 unless I see a very robust market, right? Yesterday we didn't have a robust market. It was slow and creeping, and you can see we didn't even break down until we were well into New York lunch, right? That is not the time to establish trades with a high win ratio, right? The other thing to pay attention to is in the zones. How much time are you spending in the zone, and what does your trade plan specifically call for in those zones? As I mentioned in yesterday's trade review, it's very unhealthy to flip and say, well, if one scenario, right, if I hold longer than my 20, 25, 30-minute time frame, right, because I might get paid, right, you can't flip around it the next time you take a loss, right, and then go, well, I knew I should have held. I exceeded that 25, 30-minute time frame. Determine what time frame you can hold a trade for without getting the scale. And then from there, go ahead and rotate. And then from there, go ahead and make your decision each and every time the same way so you don't have to agonize. Most of the time I can get my 2 points in less than half an hour. Once that period of time passes, you may either just simply want to exit or close out the trade. That's all I have to say about that. Should make your trading decisions a little bit easier. Let me run over to NQ real quick. So if we look at NQ yesterday, right? And let me flip back over here real fast. Okay, when NQ broke down, look at the time of day it broke down. Again, this is 11:30 in the morning. This is a very hard time of day to capture this move, right? We were just grinding. It was a valid trade. It set up a trap trade to the downside, right? Again, prior to 11 a.m., best trades. Also, another thing that I want you to look at in terms of opportunity, this whole range from bottom to top is roughly 35.55 to just past 35.65. That's a 10-point range total, and then we went into like a 2 or 3 point range rotation on NQ. This is very hard to trade, right? If I see this occurring again, I almost would rather step back than get caught stepping in front of it, okay? So what do I need to see on NQ, just like we did yesterday, right? Let's come back over to today's chart. So we're currently trading at 35.2050, which puts us roughly at the back of this yellow zone. I didn't label it as Globex high. I should have. I apologize. So what would I like to see ideally? I'd like to see a push above into the white zone. I would expect responsive sellers here. Again, I want in NQ a minimum of a 10-point rotation before taking a trade, preferably 15 to 30 points, right? And even then you can see it can get you in trouble on NQ. The nice thing about NQ is it can pay you very, very nicely if you nail it correctly. Even with your scales, it can pay you very, very nicely. I often get $150 to $200 per contract on at least a portion of that trade when I trade NQ. So if we see it open and we get above Globex highs, right, we're going to want to see it into the white zone. After it's in the white zone, the next question becomes, can we get back below Globex highs? If we do, we have a trap trade set up, right? That'll push us to the other end of the range, which could either be Globex lows or yesterday's lows. Again, in the same scenario, I'd love to see this break to the downside, trap a bunch of people, and then get back above Monday's lows. If we can get back above Monday's lows, we have a good chance of pushing back to the top of the range, whether that be the white zone or the Globex highs, one of the two. I'll be looking with regards to timing my ES trades, right? I want to see, again, is NQ providing leadership or weakness, right? Because ES has tended to follow NQ throughout this entire rally. Not every day, but most days. The other thing that I want to see is, am I getting good size rotations in the trades, right? We want to look for gap fill, half gap there as well, right? And then we want to look to see if it's sustaining above Globex highs or below Globex lows. If it's a trend day, again, the other thing that will characterize it, if you look at your tick bar yesterday on the trend day down, we had almost no rotations up in the afternoon, and tick was getting repeatedly nailing extreme ticks. So keep all of that in mind when you're looking at the NQ. It's definitely what I'll be keying off of. I wish I had a better response to that, but again, NQ tends not to have too long liquidations in a row. What tends to happen is we break below the prior day's lows, we trap aggressive late sellers or chasers on the short side, and then it pushes back up into the range and closes right in the middle, right? We tend not to close at the high or at the low, but somewhere between a third from the low to halfway to the halfway mark. So unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to wrap it up there for the executive summary and then go into the market profiles and the tick charts really quickly. So I think I covered it all. I'll look for questions real quick. Steve, I'm not clear on your question where you say buyers. I'll come back to that and see if I can clarify in a minute. I'll let you respond to that. And then let's go over to the tick chart real quick and take a look at some of the larger ranges. Hold on a second. Oh, I would expect the first time to the white zone, I would expect responsive sellers. If I said buyers, I stand corrected. I apologize. First time into the white zone. Let me go back to that really quick, guys, if I misspoke. On both NQ and ES, right? The white zone works like kryptonite. The closer we get, the more strength it has. The further we get, the less influence that it has. So I'd expect the first move up to find responsive sellers for at least a 2-point rotation, if not more. Okay, thanks. Yeah, never trust a dyslexic guy has been my motto, so keep that in mind when I'm doing this. I will reverse things from time to time. I appreciate you calling me out on it. So this is ES on the 2400, and it's a small chart. It's a 500 tick chart. But the first thing that I see very clearly, right, if I'm working off of trend lines, is that roughly that's our uptrend, right? And there's a channel right there. Oh, that fit almost perfectly. There you go. So that's the current up channel that we have. As you see, we're right at the bottom of it. And I'd want to see, obviously you want to see this channel broken, but remember, the channel's only giving me a general indication, right? It's not saying, hey, this is how it's going to be. If we look, this was the top part of the channel yesterday, and you can see we never broke it. Let's see if we can do parallel on that here real quick. So I can move that around. And I apologize for the drawing tool. I'll figure out what the heck's going on with that and get it fixed. But that is basically our channel that we had yesterday, right? It kept winding out. There's probably another one here in the middle that we could call. Let's see here. And again, I go through all day. This is all I'm doing is playing, trying to figure out where in the world the channels, support and resistance channels, are going to be. That's what the channel we have right now, right? So we could have two possibilities when I look at the channel like this, right? Certainly, if this is your first leg up, we could expect a retrace. Obviously, this is 1810 to 1820, right? So a 50% retrace would bring us right back to 1815 for a backside test here. and then would push us up for a rotation higher. And we could easily bounce along this up into the white zone, right, on the backside of this channel. The other scenario is we fall back into this channel, right, and we fall all the way to the bottom side of this channel, which would bring us in the middle, roughly to 1801, 1802 area, right? And then below that, 1792, 1794 would be the far end of this channel. Looking at it from multiple day perspective, let me see if I have a larger chart up really quick. Here we go. Let's suck this in here real quick. This is a 1450 tick chart. So, okay, so we have two areas when I look at this that are interesting to me. We have structure right here, which failed yesterday, and we're right in it right now, right? The backside of that's about 1821. And then the next major area, we try to put some structure in here, but it's not really big. Really, what stands out, right, is this entire level here. This was our breakdown point from yesterday where we had to hold. This 1825, I'd say, to 1826 to 1828-ish, right? So it's very natural. We always follow this whole methodology of breakdown, test, retest, right? Again, this is not, there's multiple ways that you can come up with zones. This is just one of the ways that I look at it. You've got to know the first time back up in here that we've trapped a ton of traders in this area up here, right? I hope everyone can see that clearly. So I've got to suspect as we push back up into this area, I'm going to find responsive sellers. There's two possible areas where that could occur, right? One area would be this structure right here, where they step in and we find responsive sellers. The other area, the true breakdown retest, will come all the way up here at the top of this structure right here, right? And so it's possible that we have, and this is again bigger picture, right? We push up, we reject down, then we come back up and we could test the bottom end of this structure and push almost all the way up, but not quite, and then fail again. You can see where that occurred, right? Where we broke down last time, you can see this breakdown, and the first time we came back up into this structure, right? Even though we eventually went higher, we first rotated down and rejected actually for the day, right? Next day we gapped up to the top of that structure, and that served as support instead of resistance now, and it launched us to this massive base out that we've been having. So the two scenarios on that, right, is either we get up here and we reject, which I suspect is what's going to happen, right? If we were to somehow gap back above this, this would act as support to push us back into the bottom area for the next major test, right? On the downside, if we go look at where we have structure, if any at all, let's see if we can find any back here. Let's see where yesterday, I'll mark off yesterday's low so we have a good way of telling. Okay, so this is yesterday's low, and this structure right here is what everyone is looking at, okay? Everyone and their brother. This thing right here, okay, there's an open gap sitting right here. I don't know if you can see that. It's been untested, and this is the bottom of the gap away, right? So somewhere between, if they're aggressive, they'll step in at 1806. If they're not aggressive, they're going to step in closer to 1804 area. That should provide our first area of support. Below that, right, you can see that we had a small amount of support at 1795, and then much longer back here at the 1792, 1790 area, okay? So that's where I would expect markets to take a pause. Again, all we expect of the zones is the market to take a pause. I would want a 2-point rotation. That's a high odds opportunity, but it doesn't have to happen that way. Let's go over, but clearly we've broken down from a major basing point, right? And we would have rather seen it kind of continue higher. That being said, bigger picture, right? Look at this. We haven't even pulled back to this area where we based out last time, right? This is our breakout area all the way down here at 1780. This is still, in my eyes, a bullish scenario. Nothing has changed. We may be pulling back, but it does not seem like we're going to have long liquidation after long liquidation. Instead, I suspect, like previous markets, we had a pattern that kind of went down. Well, much like yesterday, right? But more like these days here, right? We come down, we find sellers, then we find responsive buyers to push us back up. I expect to see a lot of this pattern right here over the next couple of days, both from the long side and from the short side, meaning when we go up, I expect to see push-ups, responsive sellers push us back down, and vice versa. We go down, responsive buyers push us back up. Let's go look at NQ really quick. How am I doing on time? 8:25. Actually, before I look at NQ, let's just take a look at the volume profile. Okay, this is the daily on ES, right? And we can see the next area right here, between here and here, right? That's the old top end of the old balance area that we had. It is very natural, right? This makes it easy to see, to come in and have a move, right? We move from area balance down. Now we're retesting. This is breakout. This is retest, right? And we could easily just simply be coming in for a retest and then back to the top end of the range, right? And I've been arguing for this larger range for quite a while, and I think that's what we're going to end up with. I wouldn't buy the panic. How will we know things have changed, right? If we get below 1800 and we can't poke our head back out above, or we repeatedly fail when we get up here, we know that we're now back in the old range, which tells us at extremes 1760 to 1800, but that the majority of the time will be spent between 1700, right, and 1795-ish. Somewhere in this range, we'll have a 35-point range, right? It's if we get below this range here, then now we look back and we go, wow, we've got a lot of overhead resistance at this point, and I would get nervous to the downside. But remember, most markets, if you go back and look at the gold market, right, they just don't flip and go straight down. They kind of did this whole song and dance back and forth. I've shown this before in prior videos, where it took a long time to actually have the short side be extremely easy, and responsive buying opportunities came quick and often, which I really liked, and I hope we go into that scenario and make all of us a lot of money. Over on the, by the way, you should mark off one thing on your 24-hour chart. When we get to this area right here, this 1832, 1834 area, right, unless we gap above it, I would expect responsive sellers the first time. This would be a great point, maybe not today, but in the next couple of days, to have a high a day and have it reject back lower, right? On the downside, we have this area, all of this from really 1799 up to 1806, right? Good areas to find responsive buyers. If we break below this, then we have a problem because we don't have anything all the way down till below 1780. But I would expect responsive buyers here the first time. You see it over and over, right, where we open in this area, this whole area acts as support, and then we push above, right? And then you can also see it the other way around, where this area, right, would provide resistance. It marked a perfect point for high, and we rejected lower. I think you can see that over and over. And even if you look here this day, right, we opened right in support, and then we're able to push above. We had to get below this little node down here. So right now, those nodes are sitting all the way up here at 1832.34 and below at 1804 to 1806, and then to a lesser extent, 1799 up to 1803. I'll be looking for an opportunity to get long in this area the first time in, and I'll look to stick a rotation out of there actually with my trailers. And NQ, if we look at the same scenario, we can see first time up into this, just below this 3560 area, right? I'd expect to find responsive sellers there. Below is another issue. Really what we have is the backside of this area right here, so just below, just around 3490-ish, right? And then below that, I'd be looking at 3465-ish area to find responsive buyers. So you want to have those larger areas where you think you'll find responsive buyers marked off, and give the market plenty of room. Don't be too quick to trade. Anyways, guys, I think that's all I have. I think I covered the scenarios really well. Hopefully, I'll start off each day with the executive summary, and that'll help people get a quicker idea of what I'm looking for. I am looking for the trap trades. If I can get short or long in the appropriate position, I'll try to push those trades with my trailers, right, to the long side. I'll give a heads up if I can call it in real time. Anyways, that's all I got, guys. Have a great day. Market's open. We'll see you soon.